The crack of gunfire echoed across the dusty main street of Springerville, Arizona Territory, as Clara Reynolds watched her husband Charles crumple to the ground, his blood staining the parched earth beneath the merciless summer sun of 1879. Her scream caught in her throat, strangled by shock and horror as the crowd that had gathered to witness the duel fell into a stunned silence. Her world, once filled with promise and hope, shattered in that single violent moment. Clara had begged Charles not to accept the challenge from Jasper Thornton, the wealthy cattle baron who had taken offense to her husband's newspaper articles exposing corruption in the county. But Charles, with his unwavering belief in truth and justice, had insisted that backing down would only embolden men like Thornton. "They need to know someone's watching," he'd told her that morning, kissing her forehead gently. "I'll be home for supper, my love." Now, as Dr. Wilson shook his head grimly after examining her husband's still form, Clara knew Charles would never come home again. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Reynolds," the doctor said quietly. "He's gone." The next few days passed in a blur of grief and arrangements. Clara moved through the funeral like a ghost, barely hearing the condolences offered by the townsfolk who had admired Charles for his principles and courage. Some whispered behind their hands that Thornton's gun had been drawn suspiciously fast, that perhaps the duel hadn't been fair after all, but what did it matter now? Charles was dead, and she was alone. The newspaper office, which had also served as their home in the rooms above, now felt cavernous and empty. Clara sat at Charles's desk, staring at the half-written article he would never finish. At 32, she was a widow in a frontier town where women had few options for independence. The thought of returning east to her family in Boston crossed her mind, but pride kept her rooted. Charles had believed in this town, in bringing truth to its people. How could she abandon that? A week after the funeral, Thornton himself appeared at her door, his expensive suit and polished boots a stark contrast to the newspaper's modest office. "Mrs. Reynolds," he said, removing his hat with an affected display of respect. "I've come to express my condolences and make you an offer." Clara's fingers tightened around the doorframe. "I have nothing to say to you, Mr. Thornton." Now, he continued, undeterred. "I understand your feelings, but business must continue. I'm prepared to purchase the newspaper for a generous sum. Enough for you to return east and live comfortably." She felt her blood run cold. "So you can silence the only independent voice in the county." "No, Mr. Thornton, the answer is no." His sympathetic expression hardened. "I don't think you understand your position, Mrs. Reynolds. A woman alone can't run a newspaper in this territory. It's only a matter of time before you fail. My offer won't remain open indefinitely." "Good day, Mr. Thornton," Clara said firmly, closing the door in his face. She leaned against it, breathing heavily, knowing his threat wasn't idle. Already the newspaper's advertisers were pulling back, worried about associating with a woman publisher or fearful of Thornton's influence. The printing press needed repairs she couldn't afford, and the next paper was due in 3 days. Clara spent the night poring over the books, the crushing reality of her situation becoming clearer with each ledger entry. By dawn, she had developed a pounding headache and no solution. With heavy steps, she made her way to the general store to purchase what supplies she could afford. As she approached the store, she noticed a commotion. A crowd had gathered around a man she'd never seen before, tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in worn trail clothes with a battered hat pulled low over his eyes. He was securing a magnificent chestnut gelding to the hitching post while fending off questions from curious townsfolk. "Just passing through," he said in a deep voice that carried across the street. "Looking for work, maybe?" Clara paused, studying the stranger. He moved with the fluid grace of someone accustomed to physical labor, but carried himself with quiet confidence. When he straightened and turned, she caught a glimpse of his face weathered by sun and wind, with a strong jaw shadowed by stubble and striking blue eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. Something about him made her pause. Perhaps it was the way he stood apart from the usual drifters who passed through Springerville. Or maybe it was simply that he represented something new in a town that had become suffocating with grief. Inside the general store, Clara selected the bare minimum of supplies she needed, painfully aware of how little money remained in her purse. As the shopkeeper, Mr. Hollister, tallied her purchases, he cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Mrs. Reynolds, about your account. I'm afraid I'll need payment in full before extending any more credit." Clara felt her cheeks burn. "I understand, Mr. Hollister. The newspaper will be back on solid footing soon." "It's not that I don't want to help," he said, lowering his voice. "But Thornton's men were in here yesterday, making it clear that anyone supporting you might find themselves without his business. I've got a family to consider." "Of course," she said stiffly, digging into her purse for the last of her coins. As she collected her meager purchases, the bell above the door jingled and the stranger entered. He nodded politely to those inside before approaching the counter, where he requested supplies for the trail. Clara couldn't help but notice that despite his worn clothing, he paid with good silver dollars. Outside, Clara struggled with her packages, trying to balance them while opening the door to the newspaper office. Suddenly, a shadow fell across her and the stranger was there. "Allow me, madam," he said, easily taking the burden from her arms. "Thank you, but I can manage," she replied, though she relinquished the packages gratefully. "I'm sure you can," he said with a slight smile. "But my mother taught me it's poor manners to watch a lady struggle when you've got two good hands to help." As he followed her into the office, Clara noticed him glancing around at the printing press and type cases. "You run the newspaper?" he asked, setting her packages on the counter. "I do now," she answered, unable to keep the edge from her voice. "My husband was the publisher until recently." Recognition dawned in his eyes. "You're Mrs. Reynolds. I heard about what happened in the last town I passed through. I'm sorry for your loss." Clara nodded, unexpectedly touched by the genuine sympathy in his tone. "Thank you, Mr. Archer." "Adam Archer," he supplied, removing his hat. "I've worked a few printing presses in my time. That one looks like it could use some attention." Clara glanced at the press, which had been temperamental even before Charles's death. "Are you offering your services, Mr. Archer?" "Could be," he said thoughtfully. "I'm looking for work and I've got some skill with machinery. Might be able to get her running right again." Clara hesitated. She needed help desperately but had no money to pay for it. "I should be honest with you, Mr. Archer. The newspaper's finances are strained at the moment. I couldn't offer much compensation." Adam studied her for a moment, his blue eyes keen. "How about room and board for a spell?" "That back room looks like it might have space for a bedroll, and I'm not particular about accommodations." Clara considered his offer. Having a man staying in the newspaper office would likely cause gossip, but she was running out of options, and there was something trustworthy about Adam Archer. "Very well," she agreed. "If you can repair the press in time for Friday's edition, you have a deal." Adam nodded, extending his hand. "Deal." His palm was calloused against hers, his grip firm but gentle. For the first time since Charles's death, Clara felt a small spark of hope. Adam proved to be as good as his word. By that evening, he had dismantled the press, cleaned every component, and reassembled it with a few improvised repairs that had it running more smoothly than it had in months. Clara watched him work, impressed by his methodical approach and the skillful way his large hands handled the delicate mechanisms. "Where did you learn about printing presses?" she asked as he tightened the final bolt. Adam wiped his hands on a rag. "Worked for a newspaper in Denver for a spell. Before that, I was in St. Louis, San Francisco. I've done a bit of everything." "You move around a lot." "Never found a reason to stay in one place too long," he admitted. "What about you? How did you end up running a newspaper in Arizona territory?" Clara sat on a nearby stool, suddenly tired. "Charles, my husband, was passionate about journalism. He believed the frontier needed honest reporting more than anywhere else. When we heard about Springerville needing a newspaper 2 years ago, he saw it as a calling." "And now?" Adam asked quietly. Now I'm trying to keep his dream alive, she said, straightforward. Though certain people in town would prefer to see the Springerville Sentinel die with its founder. Adam's expression darkened. Thornton, Clara nodded. He wants to buy the paper and shut it down. When I refused, he started pressuring advertisers and suppliers to cut ties with me. Sounds like a man accustomed to getting his way, Adam observed. He is. But I can't let him win, not after what he did to Charles. She stopped, realizing she'd said more than intended. Adam seemed to sense her discomfort and changed the subject. Well, the press is fixed. What's next for tomorrow's edition? Grateful for his tact, Clara showed him the layout she'd been working on. I need to finish this article about the county water rights dispute, but I'm struggling to understand all the legal terminology. Adam surprised her by offering insightful comments on the article, demonstrating an unexpected knowledge of water law in the territories. When she raised an eyebrow, he shrugged. Picked up a few things working cattle in Colorado. Water rights are always a contentious issue. They worked late into the night, with Adam helping to set type while Clara finished her articles. His presence made the office feel less empty, and his quiet competence gave her the space to focus on the writing that had always been her strength. By dawn, they had a complete newspaper ready for printing, and Clara felt a sense of accomplishment she hadn't experienced since Charles's death. Thank you, she said sincerely as they surveyed their work. I couldn't have done this without your help. Adam's tired face broke into a genuine smile. Happy to be useful, Mrs. Reynolds. Clara, she corrected him impulsively. If we're going to be working together, you might as well call me Clara. The next few days established a rhythm between them. Adam handled the mechanical aspects of the newspaper and distribution, while Clara focused on writing and maintaining relationships with their remaining advertisers. Together, they managed to produce a respectable edition that, while thinner than usual, still maintained the Sentinel's reputation for honest reporting. Clara noticed that Adam was careful to maintain a respectful distance, never entering her private quarters above the office and making himself scarce when she had visitors. Nevertheless, she heard the whispers when she walked through town speculation about the handsome stranger living at the newspaper office, questions about propriety. She ignored them as best she could, focusing instead on the immediate challenges of keeping the newspaper afloat. But Thornton wasn't finished with her. A week after Adam's arrival, Clara returned from an interview to find a notice tacked to her door. "What's this?" she asked as Adam handed her the paper. "Notice of a tax assessment," he explained grimly. "Says you owe 3 months of back business taxes due immediately." Clara scanned the document in disbelief. "This is ridiculous. Charles paid our taxes quarterly and they're not due for another month." "Thornton's got friends in the county office," Adam said. "It's another way to pressure you." Clara crumpled the paper in frustration. "I don't have this kind of money right now, not with half our advertisers gone. How much time do we have?" 10 days before they can legally seize the property, she said, her mind racing through limited options. Adam was quiet for a moment. "I might be able to help." Clara looked up at him, suspicious. "How?" "There's a high-stakes poker game at the Silver Dollar Saloon tomorrow night," he said. "I'm pretty good with cards." "Gambling?" Clara's voice rose in disbelief. "That's your solution." "Sometimes you have to play the hand you're dealt," he said pragmatically. "Unless you've got a better idea." She didn't, and they both knew it. "Besides," Adam continued, "I've got a stake to put up." From his pocket, he produced a small leather pouch and poured several gold coins into his palm. Clara stared at the money. "You've had that all along. Why are you working for room and board?" Adam returned the gold to the pouch. "Been saving this for something important. Figured this qualifies." "I can't let you risk your savings," she protested. "It's an investment," he countered. "In the newspaper, in what your husband stood for." Clara studied his face, trying to understand his motivation. "Why would you do this for us, for me? You barely know me." Adam looked away, seemingly uncomfortable with the question. "Let's just say I've seen what happens when men like Thornton get to decide what's true and what isn't. Someone's got to stand against that." There was a story there, Clara was certain, but Adam clearly wasn't ready to share it. Instead, she nodded slowly. All right, but I'm coming with you. Adam's eyebrows shot up. To a saloon poker game, that's no place for a lady. Clara lifted her chin. If you're risking your money for my newspaper, the least I can do is be there to support you. Besides, I'm not some delicate Eastern flower. I've been on the frontier for 2 years now. Adam looked like he wanted to argue but eventually nodded. All right, but stay close to me. That place can get rough. The following evening, Clara dressed in her most respectable outfit, a deep blue skirt and jacket that had been her Sunday best back in Boston. She pinned her honey blonde hair up severely and added her small gold cross necklace, hoping to project an image of propriety despite the impropriety of her destination. When she descended the stairs, she found Adam waiting, transformed from his usual work clothes. He wore a clean black vest over a white shirt with his trail coat brushed free of dust. He'd shaved and slicked back his dark hair, revealing more of his handsome face. You clean up well, Mr. Archer, she observed, surprised by how different he looked. As do you, Mrs. Reynolds, he replied with a slight bow. Though I still think this is a mistake. Noted, she said dryly. Shall we? The Silver Dollar Saloon was the largest establishment of its kind in Springerville, catering to cattlemen, miners, and travelers passing through. As Adam escorted Clara through the batwing doors, conversation momentarily halted, and dozens of eyes turned to stare at the unexpected sight of the newspaper publisher in such surroundings. Clara kept her head high, ignoring the whispers that followed them to the bar, where Adam ordered her a lemonade and himself a whiskey. The game's in the back room, he murmured, nodding toward a door guarded by a burly man. It starts in half an hour, big players only. Is Thornton likely to be there? She asked quietly, not personally, but his foreman might be, man named Reeves who handles Thornton's dirty work. Adam took a sip of his whiskey. Once we're in, let me do the talking. These men respect confidence, not desperation. Clara nodded, grateful for his guidance despite her earlier bravado. The saloon was louder and smokier than she'd imagined, filled with rough men whose appraising glances made her uncomfortable. She found herself standing closer to Adam, drawing reassurance from his solid presence. As they waited, the door opened, admitting a gust of cool night air, and a tall figure Clara recognized immediately Jasper Thornton himself, accompanied by 2 of his men. The cattle baron paused when he spotted Clara, a mixture of surprise and amusement crossing his aristocratic features. Mrs. Reynolds, he called, loudly enough to draw attention. What an unexpected pleasure. I had no idea the Sentinel was expanding its coverage to include our town's nightlife. Clara felt her face flush but held her ground. Mr. Thornton, I'm here as a private citizen, not as a reporter. Thornton approached them, his eyes shifting to Adam with calculating interest. And who might your companion be? Adam Archer. Adam introduced himself, not extending his hand. I work for Mrs. Reynolds. Do you indeed? Thornton's tone suggested innuendo. And what sort of work do you do? The kind that's none of your business, Adam replied evenly. Thornton's smile tightened. Well, aren't you a protective employee? I wonder if you know what you've gotten yourself into, Mr. Archer. Mrs. Reynolds has a talent for placing men in dangerous positions. Clara felt Adam tense beside her, but his voice remained calm. Sounds to me like Mrs. Reynolds stands by her principles. Some men might learn from that example. The implied criticism wasn't lost on Thornton, whose eyes hardened. Careful, Mr. Archer. Springerville isn't kind to drifters who don't understand local customs. Is threatening newcomers one of those customs? Adam asked mildly. Before Thornton could respond, the back room door opened, and the guard announced that the game was starting. Thornton gave them a final, measuring look. Enjoy your evening, Mrs. Reynolds. I look forward to our next business discussion. With that, he strode toward the poker room, his men following close behind. You didn't tell me Thornton himself would be here, Clara whispered urgently to Adam. I didn't know, he admitted. This complicates things. Should we leave? Adam considered for a moment, then shook his head. No, if anything, this is an opportunity. Thornton plays to intimidate, not necessarily to win. That can be an advantage. With determined steps, Adam guided Clara toward the back room, presenting the entry fee to the guard. Inside, they found a well-appointed space far more elegant than the main saloon, with a large green baize-covered table in the center surrounded by comfortable chairs. Several men were already seated, including Thornton and a distinguished-looking gentleman Clara recognized as Judge Wilson from the county court. Adam pulled out a chair for Clara near the wall, away from the table but with a good view of the proceedings, then took his seat among the players. Clara watched nervously as he placed his stake on the table, acutely aware that their future depended on his skill with cards. The dealer, a professional brought in for such games, explained the rules: 5-card draw, table stakes, no limit. As the cards were dealt for the first hand, Clara studied the players' faces, trying to discern their strategies. Adam's expression had become unreadable, a calm mask that revealed nothing of his thoughts. The first few hands went quickly, with players testing each other cautiously. Adam won a small pot, then folded on the next 2 hands. Thornton played aggressively, pushing bets higher than the cards seemed to warrant and forcing several players to fold. As the night progressed, the stakes increased, and the atmosphere grew tense. Clara watched Adam carefully, admiring his patience and the subtle way he tracked the other players' habits. He wasn't flashy or boastful, even when he won, simply collecting his winnings with quiet acknowledgement. By midnight, 3 players had dropped out, leaving only Adam, Thornton, Judge Wilson, and a cattle buyer from Kansas City at the table. Adam had built a respectable stack of chips, roughly double his initial stake, but Thornton's pile was substantially larger. Then came the hand that changed everything. The dealer dealt the cards, and Clara saw a flicker of something satisfaction, perhaps cross Adam's face so briefly she might have imagined it. He checked, letting the betting come to him. The cattle buyer raised, the judge called, and Thornton raised again, substantially. Adam calmly matched Thornton's raise and added more. The cattle buyer folded immediately, and after some consideration, so did the judge, leaving just Adam and Thornton. Confident, aren't you, Mr. Archer? Thornton commented, adding more chips to the pot. I play the odds, Mr. Thornton, Adam replied, matching the raise. A man who calculates risk, Thornton observed. I wonder if Mrs. Reynolds knows what a gamble she's taking by associating with you. Adam's expression didn't change. Your bet, sir. Thornton pushed forward nearly all his remaining chips, all in. A murmur ran through the spectators. Adam didn't hesitate, matching the bet with his own chips and the gold coins he'd brought as backup. Call, he said simply. What have you got? Thornton spread his cards with a triumphant smile: 3 queens and a pair of 10s. Full house. Adam nodded appreciatively, then laid down his own cards one by one: the 10, Jack, Queen, King, and Ace of Spades. Royal flush. The room fell silent. A royal flush was so rare that many professional gamblers went their entire lives without seeing one. Thornton's face flushed with anger. Impossible, he sputtered. Improbable, Adam corrected calmly, but there it is. The dealer confirmed the hand, and Adam collected his winnings, a sum that Clara estimated would cover the tax bill with plenty to spare. Thornton pushed back from the table, his eyes cold with fury. Congratulations, Mr. Archer, he said tightly. You've had a fortunate evening. Luck favors the prepared, Mr. Thornton, Adam replied, stacking his chips methodically. As they left the saloon a short time later, Clara could barely contain her excitement. Adam, that was incredible. How did you learn to play like that? Adam smiled slightly. Misspent youth. Though I should tell you that royal flush was the first I've ever had. Then we were incredibly lucky. Sometimes luck is what you need, he agreed, but we should be careful now. Thornton's not the type to accept defeat gracefully, especially not in front of the judge and other influential people. His warning proved prescient. The following morning, as Clara was preparing to take the tax payment to the county office, two of Thornton's men entered the newspaper office. "Mr. Thornton wants a word with you, Archer," the larger of the two said without preamble. Adam stood slowly from the press he'd been adjusting. "I'm afraid I'm busy at the moment. Perhaps another time." The second man stepped forward menacingly. "Wasn't a request." Clara moved to Adam's side. "This is my property, gentlemen. I'll thank you to leave immediately." "Stay out of this, Mrs. Reynolds," the first man warned. "This is between Thornton and the card sharp here." Adam placed a protective hand on Clara's arm, gently moving her behind him. "If Mr. Thornton has concerns about last night's game, he's welcome to come discuss them himself. In daylight. In public." The standoff might have escalated further had Sheriff Daniels not chosen that moment to enter the office. The lawman took in the scene with experienced eyes. "Problem here, Mrs. Reynolds?" he asked mildly, though his hand rested near his holstered revolver. "These men were just leaving, Sheriff," Clara said firmly. Thornton's men exchanged glances, then back toward the door. "This ain't over," the larger one muttered to Adam before they departed. Sheriff Daniels watched them go, then turned to Clara and Adam. "Might want to watch yourselves. Thornton's not used to losing at cards or anything else." "Thank you for stopping by, Sheriff," Clara said gratefully. The lawman nodded. "Just doing my job, madam. Though I can't always be in the right place at the right time, be careful." With that cryptic warning, he left. "He's right," Adam said once they were alone. "Thornton won't let this go. I should leave town before I bring more trouble to your door. Leave." Clara's heart sank unexpectedly at the thought. "But the newspaper is finally starting to recover. I need your help." Adam ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "Clara, Thornton is dangerous. You know that better than anyone. I won the money you needed for the taxes, but if I stay, he'll only escalate." "So we just let him win?" she demanded. Again, after what he did to Charles, Adam's expression softened. "What exactly happened with your husband's duel? I've heard rumors, but—" Clara turned away, the memories still raw. Charles exposed some of Thornton's illegal land deals in the paper. Thornton challenged him to retract the story or face consequences. When Charles refused, Thornton publicly called him a liar and a coward, things Charles couldn't ignore if he wanted the newspaper to maintain credibility. "So he accepted the duel," Adam finished quietly. "Yes, but it wasn't fair," Clara continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "Charles wasn't a gunman. He believed in using words, not violence. Thornton had his fastest man there as his second, but when the moment came, it was this man who drew, not Thornton. Charles never stood a chance." "And the sheriff did nothing," Clara laughed bitterly. "What could he do?" A dozen witnesses swore it was all according to the code Duelo. Thornton's influence runs deep in this county. Adam was silent for a long moment. "All the more reason for you to consider selling the newspaper and starting fresh somewhere else. This isn't a fight you can win alone." "I'm not alone," Clara said, meeting his gaze directly. "You're here." Their eyes held, and Clara saw something shift in Adam's expression, a softening, a recognition of something unspoken between them. The moment stretched between them, charged with possibility. Finally, Adam sighed. "For now, yes, but we need to be smart about this. Thornton won't stop at intimidation." Over the next 2 weeks, they worked to strengthen the newspaper's position. With the tax bill paid, Clara could focus on rebuilding relationships with advertisers. Adam's presence seemed to reassure some of the merchants who had been intimidated by Thornton's threats, and subscriptions began to increase as word spread that the Sentinel was producing quality editions again. Clara found herself enjoying Adam's company more each day. He was intelligent and well-read despite his rough appearance, with thoughtful opinions on everything from territorial politics to literature. In the evenings, after the day's work was done, they often sat in the office sharing stories, Clara of her life in Boston before meeting Charles, Adam of his travels across the Western Territories. He remained reticent about his past before coming west, deflecting questions with practiced ease, but Clara sensed there was more to his story than he revealed. She didn't press him, respecting his privacy as he respected hers. One evening, as they sat on the small porch outside the office watching the sunset paint the distant mountains in gold and crimson, Adam finally asked the question she'd been dreading. "Do you ever think about going back east, to your family?" Clara sipped her tea before answering. "Sometimes. But my parents didn't approve of my marriage to Charles. They thought a newspaperman in the territories was beneath me. Going back would mean admitting they were right." "And were they?" Adam asked gently. "No," she said with certainty. "The years with Charles were hard sometimes, but they were real. We were building something that mattered. I've never regretted it." Adam nodded, seeming to understand. "What about now? What are you building now?" The question caught her off guard. "I'm trying to preserve what Charles started." "Is that enough for you?" His blue eyes studied her face intently. Living for someone else's dream, Clara had never considered it that way. "The newspaper was his passion, but I believe in it too, in what it stands for." "Fair enough," Adam conceded. "But what about your own happiness, Clara? What do you want for yourself?" The question lingered between them, surprisingly intimate. Clara found herself unable to look away from his face, suddenly aware of how close they were sitting, how the dying light softened his features. "I want." She began, but the words caught in her throat as she realized the direction of her thoughts. The moment was interrupted by the sound of approaching horses. Adam was on his feet instantly, his hand moving to the revolver he kept holstered at his side. "Get inside," he said quietly, all warmth gone from his voice. Clara stood but didn't move toward the door. "Who is it?" "Riders, at least 4. Adam's eyes narrowed as he peered into the gathering dusk. "One of them's Thornton." Clara's heart raced, but she lifted her chin determinedly. "Then we'll face him together." Adam gave her a quick, searching look, then nodded reluctantly. "Stay behind me." Thornton and 3 of his men reined in before the office, dust rising around their horses' hooves. The cattle baron dismounted smoothly, dressed as if for a social call in a tailored suit and polished boots. "Mrs. Reynolds, Mr. Archer," he greeted them with false cordiality. "What a pleasant evening." "What do you want, Thornton?" Adam asked bluntly. Thornton affected a wounded expression. "Such hostility. I've merely come to make Mrs. Reynolds another business proposition." "I've already rejected your offer for the newspaper," Clara said firmly. Yes, but circumstances have changed." Thornton smiled thinly. "You see, I've recently acquired the mortgage on this building from the bank. As the new holder of the note, I'm exercising my right to call in the loan immediately." Clara felt as if the ground had dropped from beneath her feet. "That's impossible." "We have an agreement with the bank for regular payments, which we've never missed. Banks can sell mortgages at their discretion," Thornton said smoothly. "And in these uncertain times, many financial institutions prefer liquid assets. I've brought the paperwork if you'd care to examine it." Adam stepped forward, his stance protective. "This is just another attempt to force Mrs. Reynolds out. First the taxes, now this." "It's perfectly legal," Thornton countered. "Unless Mrs. Reynolds can produce the full remaining balance within 1 week, the property will revert to me." Clara's mind raced. The remaining mortgage was far more than they could possibly raise in a week, even with the money from Adam's poker winnings. "You won't get away with this," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "The people of this town need an independent newspaper." Thornton laughed. "The people of this town need jobs and stability, which I provide. They'll barely notice when the Sentinel disappears." His expression hardened. 1 week, Mrs. Reynolds, then I suggest you pack your belongings and find alternate accommodations." As Thornton and his men rode away, Clara turned to Adam, fighting back tears of frustration. "He's going to win, isn't he? Everything Charles worked for, everything he died for, it's all going to be Thornton's in the end." Adam's jaw was set in a hard line. "Not if I can help it." "What can we possibly do? We can't raise that kind of money in a week." Adam took her hands in his touch surprisingly gentle for such strong hands. "Clara, do you trust me?" The question hung between them, weighted with meaning beyond the immediate crisis. Clara searched his face, finding determination and something else, a depth of feeling that made her breath catch. "Yes," she said softly. "I trust you." The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Adam sent telegrams to contacts in several cities, rode out to neighboring towns, and held long meetings with local merchants sympathetic to Clara's situation. Meanwhile, Clara continued producing the newspaper, pouring her heart into what might be its final editions. She included a front-page editorial explaining Thornton's tactics and their impact not just on the newspaper but on the entire community's right to independent information. The response was immediate. Readers came to the office with words of support, small donations, and offers of help. But despite their generosity, the amount raised fell far short of what was needed to save the newspaper. 3 days before Thornton's deadline, Adam returned from a mysterious errand looking grim but determined. "I need to talk to you," he said, guiding Clara to a quiet corner of the office. "I think I have a solution, but you may not like it." "At this point, I'm open to anything," she said wearily. "I've arranged a meeting with investors from Denver who might be willing to buy into the newspaper, not take it over, but become silent partners with enough capital to pay off Thornton and expand operations." Hope flickered in Clara's chest. "That sounds perfect. Why wouldn't I like it?" Adam hesitated. "Because they'll only meet with a married couple. They're traditional men who don't believe a woman can run a business alone, but they might accept a husband and wife team." Clara stared at him, understanding dawning. "You're suggesting—" "A marriage of convenience," Adam finished, watching her carefully. "On paper only to secure the investment. Afterward we could continue as business partners, or—" He left the alternative unspoken. Clara's mind spun with the implications. "Adam, I can't ask you to do that." "You're not asking, I'm offering." His voice was steady, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. "It would just be a business arrangement, nothing more." The words "nothing more" stung in a way Clara hadn't expected. She turned away, needing space to think. "Why would you do this?" "Tie yourself to me, to this town?" Adam was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was low and intimate. "Maybe I'm tired of drifting. Maybe I've found something worth staying for." Clara's heart raced as she turned back to face him. "Adam." "You don't have to answer now," he said quickly. "Think about it, but the investors will be here tomorrow and they'll need an answer then." That night, Clara barely slept, her mind churning with conflicting thoughts and emotions. Marriage to Adam would save the newspaper, secure her position in the community, and provide protection from Thornton's continued threats. But it would also bind her to a man she'd known for only a month, a man with secrets in his past and an uncertain future. And yet, when she was honest with herself, the prospect of being Adam's wife, even in name only, stirred feelings she'd thought buried with Charles. There was a connection between them that transcended their shared work, a mutual respect and understanding that had grown with each passing day. By morning she had made her decision. She found Adam in the office, already at work on the press. "I'll do it," she said simply. Adam straightened, searching her face. "You're sure?" "Yes, but I need to know something first." She stepped closer to him. "Is this really just about saving the newspaper for you?" Adam's expression softened. "Clara, when I rode into Springerville, I was just passing through, looking for temporary work before moving on. I had no intention of staying. But then I met you, your courage, your determination to continue what your husband started despite everything Thornton threw at you. It made me want to be part of something meaningful again." "Again?" she prompted gently. Adam sighed, finally ready to share his past. "I was a lawyer once in Chicago, idealistic, believing in justice and the law. Then I discovered that my firm was helping powerful men steal land from farmers along the railroad's planned expansion. When I threatened to expose them, they framed me for embezzlement." His jaw tightened at the memory. "I was disbarred, nearly imprisoned. I barely escaped with my reputation in tatters." "That's why you understand what we're fighting for," Clara realized. "Yes, men like Thornton exist everywhere, using money and influence to silence the truth." when I saw you standing against that, alone but unbowed." He reached out, tentatively touching her cheek. I couldn't walk away. The tenderness in his touch made Clara's breath catch. So this marriage, it wouldn't just be for show. Adam's blue eyes held her steadily. Not for me. But I won't presume to know your feelings, Clara. If you need this to be just a business arrangement, I'll respect that. Clara took a deep breath, finally acknowledging the truth she'd been avoiding. I loved Charles deeply. His death left a hole in my heart I thought would never heal. But these past weeks with you, you've made me feel alive again, made me remember that I'm more than just a widow carrying on her husband's legacy. Adam's face transformed with hope. Clara, she placed her fingers gently over his lips. I'm not ready to say I love you, Adam. It's too soon, and there's still so much we don't know about each other, but I'm willing to find out if what's growing between us could become something real. Adam's smile was radiant as he took her hands in his. That's more than I dared hope for. The meeting with the investors the next day went better than expected. The three gentlemen from Denver were impressed with Clara's editorial direction and Adam's plans for expanding the newspaper's reach. By the end of the afternoon, papers were signed guaranteeing their investment in exchange for a 30% stake in the renamed Springerville Independent. With the new funds secured, Clara paid off Thornton's mortgage claim with hours to spare before his deadline. The look on the cattle baron's face when she presented the bank draft was one she would savor for years to come. "This isn't over, Mrs. Reynolds," he said tightly as he accepted the payment. "That's Mrs. Archer now," she corrected him, lifting her left hand to show the simple gold band Adam had placed there that morning in a small ceremony at the town church. "And you're right, it isn't over. The Independent will continue to report the truth about your business dealings, Mr. Thornton. The only difference is that now we have the resources to withstand your intimidation." Thornton's eyes darted between Clara and Adam, calculating this new development. "Congratulations on your hasty marriage," he said coldly. "One might almost think it was arranged specifically to thwart my business interests." "Think what you like," Adam said, placing a protective arm around Clara's shoulders. "But understand this. Any action you take against my wife or our newspaper will be met with the full force of the law and public opinion. Your days of operating in the shadows are over." Something in Adam's tone, or perhaps the new alliance their marriage represented, seemed to give Thornton pause. With a curt nod, he departed, leaving Clara and Adam victorious, but aware that they had made a powerful enemy. In the weeks that followed, Clara and Adam settled into their new roles as husband and wife, publishers and partners. Despite their agreement to take things slowly, their living arrangement necessitated a new level of intimacy, sharing meals, working side by side, learning each other's habits and preferences. Clara found herself increasingly drawn to Adam's quiet strength and unexpected tenderness. He treated her with respect as a business partner, but also with a gentle consideration that spoke of deeper feelings. For his part, Adam seemed content to follow Clara's lead, never pressuring her for more than she was ready to give, but making his own feelings clear through 1,000 small gestures of care and affection. The newspaper thrived under their joint leadership. Adam's legal background proved invaluable in navigating the complex issues affecting the territory, while Clara's way with words brought those issues to life for their readers. Together, they built the Independent into a voice for justice and accountability that extended far beyond Springerville's boundaries. Thornton remained a threat on the horizon, but with the newspaper's increased prominence and Adam's strategic alliances with influential figures in territorial politics, his options for retaliation were limited. Still, Clara and Adam remained vigilant, knowing the cattle baron was merely biding his time. 3 months after their wedding, as winter settled over the high desert, bringing crisp nights and the promise of snow, Clara found Adam standing on their porch late one evening, staring up at the star-filled sky. "Penny for your thoughts," she asked, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders against the chill. Adam turned to her with a smile that still made her heart skip. "Just thinking about how much has changed since I rode into town. I came here with nothing but my horse and the clothes on my back, no roots, no purpose beyond the next day's work. And now," Clara moved to stand beside him, close enough to feel the warmth of his body. "Now I have a home, a business, a future." His voice softened. "And you?" The word hung between them, laden with meaning. Over the past months, their marriage had evolved from a practical arrangement into something deeper, though they had yet to cross the final boundary between friendship and true marriage. Both had been cautious, respecting the complexities of their situation and the shadows of the past. "Adam," Clara said softly, gathering her courage, "I've been thinking about our arrangement." His expression grew guarded. "Is something wrong?" "No," she assured him quickly. "Just the opposite, I think. I think I'm ready for this to be a real marriage in every way." Adam's eyes widened, hope and desire flickering in their blue depths. "Clara, are you sure? I don't want you to feel obligated because of our situation." "I'm sure," she said firmly. "I've been sure for weeks, but afraid to say it, afraid that somehow it would dishonor Charles's memory. But I've realized that loving you doesn't diminish what I had with him. It's just different, a new chapter." Adam reached out, cupping her face in his hands with exquisite gentleness. "I love you, Clara. I have almost from the moment I saw you, standing strong despite everything you'd lost. I would have waited as long as you needed." "You don't have to wait anymore," she whispered, rising on tiptoes to press her lips to his. The kiss began tentatively, a question being asked and answered, then deepened into something more passionate as months of restrained emotion finally found expression. Clara felt herself melting into him, her body responding to his touch with a hunger that surprised her. When they finally parted, breathless, Adam rested his forehead against hers. "You don't have to face tomorrow alone, Clara, not ever again." Those simple words, spoken with such sincerity, broke through the final barrier around her heart. "Take me inside, Adam," she said softly. "Take me to our bed." That night, their marriage was consummated with a tenderness and passion that left Clara breathless. Adam was a considerate and attentive lover, attuned to her every response, guiding her through moments of uncertainty with patient understanding. In his arms, Clara rediscovered parts of herself she had thought lost forever: her capacity for joy, for abandon, for complete trust in another person. Afterward, lying in the circle of his arms with her head pillowed on his chest, Clara felt a sense of peace she hadn't known since before Charles's death. This was right, this new beginning with Adam. It didn't erase the past, but it offered a future bright with possibility. "What are you thinking?" Adam murmured, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. Clara smiled against his skin. "I'm thinking that for a marriage of convenience, this has turned out remarkably well." His chest rumbled with quiet laughter. "Indeed it has, Mrs. Archer, indeed it has." Spring came early to Springerville that year, bringing with it new growth and renewed hope. The Independent had established itself as the leading newspaper in the county, with a reputation for fearless reporting and thoughtful analysis. Clara and Adam worked seamlessly together, their professional partnership as strong as their personal one. Thornton had been unusually quiet through the winter months, leading some to believe he had finally accepted defeat. But Clara and Adam knew better, remaining vigilant even as they focused on building their life together. Their caution proved warranted when, on a bright April morning, Sheriff Daniels arrived at the newspaper office with grim news. "Thornton's filed a legal petition to have the county revoke your printing license," he informed them. "Claims you're publishing libelous material harmful to the territory's economic interests." "That's ridiculous," Clara protested. "Everything we've published about Thornton's operations is factually accurate and in the public interest." "I know that," the sheriff said wearily, "but the hearing's set for next week before Judge Wilson, and you know how close he and Thornton are." Adam's expression was thoughtful rather than worried. "We anticipated something like this. The Independent isn't just a local paper anymore. We have subscribers throughout the territory and connections in Tucson and Santa Fe. Thornton can't silence us as easily as he could the Sentinel." "Maybe not," the sheriff acknowledged, "but he's pulling out all the stops this time. I've heard rumors he's brought in hired guns from outside the territory. Be careful, both of you." After the sheriff left, Clara turned to Adam. "Do you think he's right about the gunmen?" "It's possible," Adam admitted. "Thornton's running out of legal options to stop us. The Independent's recent exposé on his water rights manipulation cost him a lucrative deal with Eastern investors." Clara nodded grimly. "So what do we do?" "We prepare our defense for the hearing and we stay alert," Adam said, reaching for his coat. "I'll speak with our lawyer in Tucson. We need to ensure we have all our evidence properly documented." As Adam prepared for the trip to Tucson, Clara couldn't shake a sense of foreboding. "Perhaps I should come with you." Adam shook his head. "One of us needs to stay and continue working on the next edition. Besides, you're more familiar with the sources for the Thornton articles. If Thornton's men are watching, it's better if we're not both on the road." Reluctantly, Clara agreed to the plan. The morning of Adam's departure, she rose early to prepare breakfast and see him off. As they stood beside his horse, Clara felt an unexpected surge of anxiety. "Be careful," she said, straightening his collar unnecessarily. "Stay alert on the trail." Adam smiled reassuringly. "I'll be fine. It's only 2 days to Tucson and I'll be back before the hearing." "I know, I just—" Clara hesitated, then continued in a rush. "I've lost one husband already. I couldn't bear to lose another." Adam's expression softened. He cupped her face in his hands, kissing her with tender passion. "You won't lose me, Clara. I promise you that." Clara watched him ride away until he disappeared around the bend, then returned to the newspaper office to immerse herself in work. The day passed quickly as she prepared articles for the next edition and reviewed evidence for the upcoming hearing. As evening approached, Clara was startled by a knock at the office door. Opening it cautiously, she found Molly Baker, the young woman who worked at the hotel across the street. "Mrs. Archer," Molly said breathlessly. "There's men asking about Mr. Archer at the hotel when he left, which road he took to Tucson. They don't look like regular travelers, if you take my meaning." Clara's heart raced with sudden fear. "How many men, Molly?" "3, rough-looking types. One had a scar across his cheek." Molly glanced nervously over her shoulder. "Mrs. Hargrove told them what they wanted to know, not realizing they might mean harm. I thought you should know." "Thank you, Molly," Clara said urgently. "This is important information." After Molly left, Clara paced the office, her mind working frantically. If Thornton's men were following Adam, he could be riding into an ambush. She needed to warn him, but how? He had several hours head start, and she couldn't be certain which route he'd taken. A desperate plan formed in her mind. Clara had learned to ride during her years in the territory, though she wasn't as skilled as Adam. If she left immediately and took the shortcut through Thompson's Pass, she might be able to catch up to him before he made camp for the night. Without allowing herself time for doubt, Clara gathered supplies and her husband's spare revolver. She left a note for their typesetter explaining her absence, then hurried to the livery stable, where she arranged to rent the stable owner's fastest mare. "You sure about this, Mrs. Archer?" The stable owner asked skeptically. "That's rough country to be riding through alone, especially this close to dark." "I have no choice, Mr. Peterson," Clara replied, mounting the horse with determined grace. "My husband's life may depend on it." The ride was more challenging than Clara had anticipated. The trail through Thompson's Pass was steep and narrow, requiring her full attention as daylight faded. By the time she reached the summit, stars were appearing in the darkening sky, and she was forced to slow her pace to navigate the unfamiliar terrain. Despite her best efforts, night had fallen completely before Clara spotted the glow of a campfire in the distance. Approaching cautiously, she dismounted and secured her horse, then crept forward on foot, the revolver clutched in her trembling hand. Relief flooded through her when she recognized Adam's form sitting by the fire. He was alone, his back to her as he studied some papers by the firelight. Clara stepped forward, about to call out when a twig snapped somewhere to her right. Adam's head jerked up at the sound. In one fluid motion, he drew his revolver and extinguished the fire, plunging the camp into darkness. "Who's there?" His voice came from a different position than where he'd been sitting, telling Clara he'd moved immediately for cover. "Adam, it's me," she called softly, heart pounding. "Clara," disbelief colored his tone, "what the hell are you doing out here?" Before she could answer, a voice called from the darkness. "That's far enough, Archer. Drop your gun or the lady gets a bullet." Clara felt cold metal press against the back of her head. A rough hand gripped her arm, pulling her backward and using her as a shield. "Let her go," Adam's voice was deadly calm. "This is between Thornton and me." "Not anymore," the unseen gunman replied. "Boss wants both of you dealt with, permanent-like. Now drop the gun." Clara could feel Adam's indecision even without seeing him. She knew he was calculating angles, probabilities, searching for a way out that wouldn't risk her life. "Don't do it, Adam," she called, summoning courage she didn't know she possessed. "He'll kill us both anyway." The gunman tightened his grip painfully. "Shut up, lady." Clara remembered the revolver still clutched in her hand, hidden by the darkness and her skirts. Slowly she adjusted her grip, praying the man wouldn't notice the movement. "All right," Adam said finally. "I'm putting it down, just don't hurt my wife." Clara heard the soft thud of Adam's gun hitting the ground. "Smart move," the gunman said with satisfaction. "Jackson, Reeves, you can come out now. We got them both." As two more shadows emerged from the darkness, Clara made her move. With every ounce of strength she possessed, she drove her elbow backward into her captor's stomach and twisted away, firing the revolver toward the ground at his feet. The muzzle flash temporarily illuminated the scene, Adam diving for his discarded weapon, the startled faces of Thornton's men frozen in the brief light. Then chaos erupted as multiple guns fired in the darkness. Clara threw herself to the ground, heart pounding so loudly she could barely hear the shouts and curses around her. A body fell heavily nearby, followed by more gunshots and the sound of running feet. "Clara?" Adam's urgent whisper came from somewhere to her left. "Are you hit?" "No," she whispered back. "Are you?" "I'm fine. Stay down." Silence fell, broken only by a low moan from the direction where her captor had been standing. After several tense moments, Adam struck a match, holding it high to survey the scene. One of Thornton's men lay motionless nearby. Another was clutching his leg and cursing weakly. The third had apparently fled. Adam quickly secured the wounded man, binding his injury and tying his hands, then turned to Clara. In the fading matchlight, his face was a mask of concern and barely controlled fury. "What were you thinking, coming out here alone?" he demanded, pulling her to her feet and checking her for injuries. "You could have been killed." "Thornton's men were asking about you in town," she explained breathlessly. "They knew which way you'd gone. I had to warn you." Adam's anger dissolved, replaced by a mixture of admiration and exasperation. "You incredible, reckless woman," he murmured, pulling her into a fierce embrace. "Don't you ever do anything like that again." Clara clung to him, the danger of the situation finally hitting her now that it was over. "I couldn't let them hurt you," she whispered against his chest. "I couldn't lose you too." Adam kissed the top of her head. "You didn't lose me. Thanks to you, we're both still here." By morning, they had the situation well in hand. The wounded gunman, facing the prospect of hanging for attempted murder, was eager to cooperate, confirming that Thornton had hired them specifically to prevent Adam from reaching Tucson. "Boss said if you testified at that hearing with all your evidence, he'd be finished," the man explained. "Said it was worth any price to stop you." With their prisoner secured on his horse, Adam and Clara rode together to the nearest town with a telegraph office. There, they sent messages to Sheriff Daniels in Springerville and the federal marshal in Tucson, detailing Thornton's murder attempt and the evidence they had gathered against him. "This changes everything," Adam said as they waited for responses. Attempted murder of newspaper publishers is beyond what even Thornton's friends in the county can overlook. Clara nodded, still processing the night's events. Will it be enough to stop him for good? With the evidence we've collected and this man's testimony? Yes, I believe it will. Adam's prediction proved accurate. By the time they returned to Springerville 3 days later, federal marshals had already arrested Thornton on multiple charges, including conspiracy to commit murder. The legal hearing that had been intended to silence the Independent instead became the forum for exposing Thornton's criminal enterprises. In the aftermath, Clara and Adam found themselves celebrated as heroes throughout the territory. Newspapers as far away as Denver carried the story of the courageous publishers who had stood against corruption and violence. Subscriptions to the Independent soared, and new investors approached them with offers of expansion. We could open offices in Tucson and Santa Fe, Adam suggested one evening as they reviewed their suddenly improved financial situation. Create a network of independent papers committed to honest reporting. Clara smiled at his enthusiasm, but felt a strange reluctance. That sounds like a lot of travel and time away from home. Adam studied her face. Something else on your mind? Clara hesitated, then took his hand, guiding it to rest against her stomach. I was thinking we might want to focus on building something else first. Adam's eyes widened as understanding dawned. Clara, are you? She nodded, her eyes bright with unshed tears of joy. The doctor confirmed it yesterday. We're going to have a baby, Adam. The look of wonder and love that transformed his face was everything Clara had hoped for. Adam gathered her in his arms with exquisite gentleness, as if she had suddenly become infinitely precious. A baby, he whispered against her hair. Our baby. Clara laughed softly, relishing his reaction. Due in early December, the doctor thinks. Adam pulled back to gaze into her eyes, his own suspiciously bright. You've given me so much, Clara, a home, a purpose, your love, and now a child. I never dreamed I could be this blessed. We've given each other these things, she corrected him softly. When you rode into Springerville that day, I was a woman drowning in grief and fear. You didn't just save the newspaper, Adam, you saved me. We saved each other, he said, stroking her cheek tenderly. And now we'll build a future together for us and for our child. In the years that followed, the Independent flourished under their joint leadership, becoming one of the most respected newspapers in the Arizona territory. Clara and Adam welcomed their son, Benjamin Charles Archer, that December, followed 2 years later by a daughter, Elizabeth. Thornton's empire crumbled during his lengthy imprisonment, his land and holdings sold to pay his debts and legal fees. By the time he was released, a broken and bitter old man, Springerville had transformed into a thriving community with the Independent at its heart. Sometimes, when the office was quiet and the children were asleep upstairs, Clara would find Adam standing on the porch, looking up at the stars with that same contemplative expression she'd first noticed years before. Still counting your blessings. She would tease, slipping her arm around his waist, and Adam would smile that still made her heart skip, drawing her close against the desert night's chill. Every day, he would answer. Every single day. In those moments, Clara would remember that dark day when she had watched Charles fall, believing her world had ended. She could never have imagined then that from such tragedy would come such joy, that a drifting cowboy with kind eyes and gentle hands would help her find the strength to build a new life from the ashes of the old. You don't have to face tomorrow alone, he had told her. And because she had found the courage to believe him, she never had to again.